welcome to another exciting video. So till now what we have been able to do is create and verify users via AppWrite magic URL functionality, which creates a session. Now we have used that session to grant access to the users logging in, and then we have also implemented the logout functionality where we are deleting the session programmatically. Now what's remaining is making use of that session further in the application. So over here, we'll be starting with our custom hook, which will be used to implement this functionality. Now over here in our code, as of now, in our nav.tsx file, we are making use of the session component. Whatever session we are getting from AppWrite, we are using it over here, and there we are setting it as data.session. Now, in order to make use of this session across the application, we will be wrapping our main.tsx component that you see over here within that hook. So the first thing that we need to do is create a directory over here. Let's call it as hooks. And within this, we'll be creating a file, user authentication. So we'll name it as useauth.tsx. Now inside this file, we'll be doing a couple of things, like we'll be creating a context, then we'll also be creating a provider, and we'll making use of the useauth state and useauth. So provider is going to be a component that wraps the entire application, and we are going to create an internal hook which we are going to call useauth state, which is just going to allow us to work with the logic inside of this hook. Finally, our useauth hook, which will be exported, and pretty simple, it will just use an instance of the auth state. Ultimately, the useauth hook will allow us to access that state anywhere inside of the tree that's wrapped by this provider. So let's get started. Here, the first thing that we need is the create context, use state, use effect, React node from React, and models from AppWrite. We'll be also taking few more things from the libauth, where we have the login, verify session, get current session, delete current session, and verify session options. This is something that we will be introducing in our auth library. Now, we'll be creating an interface over here, and we'll call our interface as event auth context. So here we have the session, the login, the logout, and the verify session. Next, we'll have our auth context, and we'll be using the create context from React, and we'll be passing the type over here or the interface over here, initializing it with undefined. Next, we'll have our auth provider props as React node, because we'll be wrapping within this. So auth providers will have a number of children to which this session will be passed. Now let's go ahead and implement this auth provider. So here we have the auth provider, and we are using the auth provider props for children. And here you can see that we have returned this as auth context.provider. We'll be passing some authentication values, which basically will be session, and then we are wrapping the children within that so that these values can be passed to the children. We also have this useauth state, where instead of this nav having the session implementation, we will now have it over here inside the useauth state. So you can see that we are making use of the session and set session over here. We are using the use effect to set this session. So basically, we will be removing this implementation from nav.tsx, and we're moving it to the useauth.tsx file. Then we have the logout method over here, and this verifies session and save. And finally, we are returning the following: session, login, logout, and verify session. Here we have the useauth, and if the auth context is not proper, it's going to throw this error that useauth cannot be used outside of auth context. Now let's go ahead and implement this verify session as well. So here in our auth.ts file, if you notice, we have this verify session, and over here when we are calling this, it's now changed because it's expecting this verify session options. So over here we'll be tweaking this particular method, and now it's going to have the verify session options, user ID and secret, and here we have updated the same. So now it's passing this model and then the account app.update magic URL session is taking care of the URL generation. Now let's save this, and we have our use auth completed. In our main.tsx file, we'll be using this or importing this auth provider that we have now created. So on top, we'll have the import statement going in. And once we have that, we will be wrapping the router within the auth provider context. And finally, we'll be heading over to our nav.tsx file. And over here, we will be getting rid of the get current session, delete current session. And instead of that, we will be just making use of the use auth hook that we have created. We'll also get rid of this functionality that we had earlier. So this has now been moved to the use auth. So we'll be removing this whole thing, and we'll be replacing it with the use auth functionality that now provides us session and logout. We'll also be deleting these two, and we'll simply replace it with await logout. Now let's save this, and we'll also be making a couple of changes in these files. Login.tsx, over here you can see we are now making use of use auth to get the login and session. Obviously we'll be implementing this session feature in the upcoming lecture, but the login functionality is now taken from the use auth hook that we have created. And under session, you will notice, because we changed the verify session how it works, we are now making use of the use auth hook over here, and we are using the verify session from use auth. Then this verify session has been used over here. So now we are passing the user ID and secret as object parameters over here. Now let's save this and run it. Here we'll be providing the email address. Click on submit, and we should be receiving an email. And let's go ahead, and so here I'll be pasting the link that we have received, and there you go. We're now able to log in successfully, and here we have the logout link coming up as well. And the next one, we'll see how we can pass this whole session thing to other pages like the index page